at the Liberty Clubhouse in beautiful downtown Worcester on this mid-November Saturday afternoon. Brad Wyatt, who had owned the building, the old Osgood Bradley building, has sold it, and you'll no longer be able to use this, but it was used for a number of years by any patriotic group, liberty promoting group in the area, in the region. Today's presentation, I entitled it Stop Obama's Free Trade Agenda, although if Mitt Romney was president, it would be Stop Mitt Romney's Free Trade Agenda, because the neoconservatives are very much in favor of this as well. Before I get into the short presentation, I just want to recommend some reading. This is the book written by R. Thompson, International Merger. R. Thompson is the CEO of the John Birch Society. This book is available on Shop, JBS, and I would assume Amazon. Last year, we did a special issue on the subject in our publication called The New American. And this particular issue, I have lots of available, 3 for $1. We will be doing an updated version from massive distribution, but we want to get started as soon as possible. I also have these available at a case lot for very short money. I got about 1,000 copies at 10 cents a piece, plus shipping, which we're going to be using as we visit State House, state elected officials, this coming up in January when they get back in session, with the hope of getting resolutions introduced to say no to it. And I'll talk about that. Now, I have an interesting book here, The Great Deception, Can the European Union Survive? Pointing out how the European Union was sold to people as a whole, just a trade consortium between coal and steel producing nations. Now they've lost their sovereignty, as nations have signed up. And this is available as well. So here you see a slide of a quote by Frank Piplat, Public Relations Officer of the European Community. And he said, "You're coming in if we have to drag you, kicking and screaming." That's the sentiment of a Bolshevik or a Nazi, not a person who loves freedom. And if it was such a great idea, you think people would just flock to it. You think governments and people would vote because it's a good idea. It's going to help our nation and help trade and help make us all be comfortable, what have you. Plenty of jobs, plenty of all the good things in life. But that's not the case here. What would you agree to a trade agreement? And let me address the term agreement. The U.S. Constitution gives Congress the authority to, the Senate, I should say, ratifies treaties, but all commerce under Article 1, Section 8, Congress deals with, right? Between the states and between the foreign nations. The President has the right to negotiate a treaty, but it has to be approved by two-thirds of the Senate. The advice and consent of these two-thirds of the Senate, or I should say two-thirds of those present. So you can get a treaty passed with 51 people sitting, 51 senators. So an agreement is not constitutional, but this has the force of a treaty. So even having an agreement, all you need with this is a simple majority in both House and Senate. Okay, things we have to ask ourselves: is our government moving us towards socialism? I think anybody that honestly examines that, of course, even those who call themselves progressives, of course that's what they want, socialism. So, both domestic and foreign policies are implemented by the same administration. Can one be a socialist policy and the other one free? So, in other words, people will ask me, what do you think of Obama's recent appointment or Obama's proposal? Everything that man is doing is to destroy our nation. Destroy freedom and liberty. Show me one thing he's done to advance freedom and liberty in the years he's been president. You're going to have to look awfully hard, right? Why would a free trade deal be any different? Now, he's going to mess up everything, but he's going to get it right when it comes to the so-called free trade. The federal government does not have a good track record in solving problems. They usually make them worse. It's interesting, the book called The Law, published in 1850 by written by a Frenchman, Frederick Bastiat. He said in the book, the poison and the antidote are created in the same laboratory. Interesting. But usually the antidote doesn't really alleviate the poison. It just makes matters. It gives you the appearance that it does, right? There was a cartoon I saw years ago. There was a picture of Governor Nelson Rockefeller of New York at the time. And someone said to him, he said, do you plan to solve the problem, Governor? Of course we plan to solve it. That's why we created it, see. And every time they solve it, it always means more government, higher taxes, less freedom. What makes us believe they can solve trade issues? Okay? Obama has something else in mind and is pushing for the fast-track legislation. Let me kind of quickly explain that. When they have this fast track, here is the agreement that we negotiated behind closed doors. You have to vote for it, yes or no, up and down. No debates, you can't pull page 20 out. In other words, you have to pass it, and we'll worry about what it says once it's passed, just like Obamacare, right? And again, Congress should never give that authority up under the Constitution. It's their job to do that, to regulate trade between the foreign nations. Not Obama and his little elitist behind the scenes making these agreements with European and Asian elites. Okay? If it is simply trade, why the need for secrecy until the pact is laid before Congress? If it is simply trade, why can't Congress be allowed to amend? If it contains over 2,000 pages, why the rush to pass it before anyone can read it? Right? And usually, free trade is the absence of government, not the presence of it. I understand that this free trade agreement, well, the Trans-Pacific and Transatlantic, there's several of them, 38 or more chapters, and only 4 of the chapters deal with free trade. There are lots of other things in there, folks, that got nothing to do with free trade. Okay? Most business and professional organizations are for the new free trade agreements because they are not given time to read them. They believe the hype. Rand Paul, somebody that many of us probably supported and admired, last year, 2013, he was against it. He asked the right questions. Just recently, it was early November, he's coming out demanding that we pass this thing. What happened? Yeah, I asked the same question. Why? What happened? See? There are groups like the American Legislative Exchange Council, conservative legislators, a private organization of conservative legislators, state legislators, are pushing this. See, the word free trade, or the term free trade, people think it has to do with free trade. And free trade's a good thing, right? Well, there'll be a few slides and you'll understand maybe free trade is so good, right? Again, I'm thinking of the group there, one of the big retail groups supports these too. So let's get into NAFTA a little bit. You remember NAFTA, 1973, 74? And there was a lot of opposition to that, wasn't there? You remember Ross Perot, the great sucking sound, it would be the sound of our jobs. You had unions coming out against this. You had people on both sides of the political spectrum working against this. When's the last time you saw some union official working with the John Birch Society and some of the liberty groups that are around them? Not too often. Most people didn't know NAFTA included a NAFTA tribunal, a NAFTA court, a court of original jurisdiction in contradiction of our Constitution, right? In fact, it was John Kerry who said, oh, if we knew that was there, we wouldn't have supported it. Well, didn't you have one of your staffers read it, John? Why don't you repeal it? He was still the senator at the time. Why didn't you repeal it? Oh, we're not going to repeal it, you see. Ed Markey was on the campaign trail last year, that special election before he got another 6 years. Ed Markey is a long-time House Representative from Massachusetts, big-time leftist. He's yapping about how he supports the unions and jobs and this and that. And it was in front of a supermarket. I had no idea that he'd even be there, but that's why he had his cell phones become video cameras, right? So he's talking about creating jobs, and I said, are you going to repeal NAFTA? You supported it back in the 90s. He glanced at me, looked right away. I said, you see, folks, he won't even answer the question. Don't even bring it up, okay? In the wake of NAFTA, 1,000 manufacturing jobs lost. Now, this building is an example. What happened to Brad Wyatt's business? Brad used to make blades, the granite, diamond tip blades. This place was humming with machines and people who had good jobs. In fact, 3 generations of people, the business was 3-generational, and many of the workers, they loved working here, right? I think they used to make trains here originally. Oscar Bradley made locomotives originally. And anyway, regulations made it almost impossible to compete in a global economy But what sealed the fate of this company, this particular place, was NAFTA. You couldn't compete, so we had to sell the business. You didn't want to, but when you're losing thousands of dollars a month, you've got to do something quick. So we had to do that. So NAFTA, if you look at Worcester and you see how it's been deindustrialized, NAFTA, although some of them were already out of business, it closed a lot of them too. So, NAFTA laid the foundation. When you lose 1,000 manufacturing jobs,
That's $1 million.
oh, I'm sorry, thank you. 1 million, not 1,000, 1 million. Thank you for correcting me. When you lose 1 million manufacturing jobs, you lose a lot of other jobs in the support industry, between restaurants and dry cleaning businesses and many other support industries that make those million manufacturing jobs possible. Okay. It also laid the foundation for Security and Prosperity Partnership, the SPP. Doesn't that make you feel warm and fuzzy? Security and Prosperity Partnership. I feel so warm and fuzzy when I hear these terms, right? The SPP, the North American Union, okay? Common Tariff and Border. Integration of health services. Integration means that our system is working with Canada and Mexico, right? Environmental regulations, banking regulations, law enforcement, and Army, right? This was indeed a partnership in every sense of the term. Now, getting back to the SPP, the JBS launched a major campaign, and we weren't alone, but we took the leadership role, and we killed it. We killed it in its tracks. Now, here's the eminent Henry Kissinger. In my opinion, one of the most wicked men of the 20th century and now 21st century. And by the way, he's got, from this country, he's got a lot of competition, okay? The man who abandoned the POWs in the Vietnam War. The man who negotiated treaties with the most vile regime, Soviet Union, then set them up in the factory business, in the manufacturing of weapons, gave them technology to put to merge their missiles. So now they could, they would have these multiple independent reentry vehicles, technology available nowhere else in the world, and how he bullied a company in Vermont to sell the technology, right? Wicked man. And what he said, the most creative step toward a new world order. It was his own writings. I think it was in either the New York Times or Wall Street Journal. His term, you can go to YouTube and put Henry Kissinger, New World Order, and he uses the term quite a lot. A New World Order means world government. Okay. It is not a conventional trade agreement, but the architect of a new international system. That came through with NAFTA serving as the foundation for the North American Union. And now this is a globalist, Daniel Hamilton, member of the Council on Foreign Relations. Isn't it interesting that the CFR is up to their eyeballs in promoting this too? I actually had meant to show another book here. It was called Building a North American Community. And our former illustrious governor, William Weld, was one of the authors of that article. The Republican, conservative, fiscal conservative that's selling our country out, folks. Okay? So this Daniel Hamilton, the goal of the transatlantic market would not be another free trade agreement. It would be more ambitious, rooted in the potential of the transatlantic partnership, just like Henry Kissinger. Now, back in the 50s, there was a group called the Atlantic Union. It was a group that was advocating that we merge back with England. Clarence Strite was the founder. You can go online. I think they ended up merging with another World Federalist type group, but they were openly advocating world government. You would actually find resolutions introduced into various state legislators calling for world government, to change an Article 5 convention, to change our form of government to have a world government possible. So, and a lot of Republicans pushing this too. Ronald Reagan was I think he was the vice president of World Federalist of California. So you had a lot of these people had this notion that we had a terrible war, if we have a world government, there won't be any more wars, and that'd be great. No, we'll have world tyranny, and genocide would be a common occurrence. Okay. In the broadest terms, a US-EU deal would allow the United States and Europe to maintain their sovereignty over global economic governance. They love that term, global governance. Both recognize that their ability to set global rules will diminish as economic power shifts to the Asia-Pacific region in the coming decade. No one power will be able to drive the international agenda, but if they join forces, the United States and Europe can channel their combined economic weight to keep control of the reins of the government economic order. So he said, oh, in other words, the yellow menace. We have to, so they're trying to sell it as that, right? This guy should be called a racist. You know, this isn't 1941 anymore, folks, or 1920s, you see, but he gets away with it. His name is Tyson Marker, Foreign Affairs, which is the publication of the Council on Foreign Relations. If you pick up a copy of the Council of CFR Journal, Foreign Affairs, that usually stuff what they advocate usually happens a couple of years later, because they're the power brokers in this country. A lot of people in denial over that, but if you look at their influence in academia, in the media, and in Congress, in the executive branch, in the Senate, in the House, quite a few, folks. If NAFTA and Obamacare are any examples, the agreements with thousands of pages long, ponderous to read, and contain provisions that also integrate our economy and society with Europe. And based on the words of those involved in the process, they will tie the United States into the structure of the EU, not simply open the gates for trade. And by the way, there's a lot of opposition